My opinion's been fairly heavily revised about him because I think people had the impression he's a little bit stronger than he is initially, and I honestly think he's getting figured out a bit. The best characters in this game have brain dead offense. Luke is not stupid enough to be a top 5 character.
I would say that Luke has something like straight B pluses across the board. His neutral, his damage output, his defensive options, his fireball game, his V-trigger, they're all really good. He's always got options that enhance one another, and so all those B pluses, when used in tandem with one another, add up to like S, and maybe the best in the game. Hello, how's your week going so far?
It is going pretty darn well.
I was talking to the people. Like, comment, subscribe. Let us know how you're. No, I'm just kidding. I just feel like being a jerk. That's me.
You know what, John? You're playing Luke a lot these days, and Luke is. Some people think he's kind of a jerk character, and I kind of want to talk about that.
I'm not so sure that people do think that, but that's perfect. Like, that's what we're kind of going to get into, is the 45th and final character is here, and he's been around since November 28th. What is that, 5-6 weeks or so that we've had with him about now? And is it still early? Sure. But let's try to place him and see where he might be on the tier list as of right now. And so before we get into any of the details, we'll talk about a lot of different things that kind of point to where he might be. But I want to flat out ask you in the kind of a 3-part question. Is he a top 10 character, in your opinion?
John, before I answer that, I have to ask our audience to please psycho crush the like button, because after they hear my response, they may not want to do it. So, but yes. I do think Luke is a top 10 character in this, but around a top 10 character, actually. My opinion's been fairly heavily revised about him because I think people had the impression he's a little bit stronger than he is initially, and I honestly think he's getting figured out a bit. But how do you feel about him?
I think yes to top 10. Now I want to ask you top 5, and it sounds like I've already sort of heard your response there, but go ahead and state it.
Yeah,
no.
And let me explain why, because the thing about that Luke does not have is he does not have brain dead offense in this game. And the best characters in this game have brain dead offense, where it's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make you hold a serious plus frames mix up and then heavy Okazemi, and you have to guess if you want to win. And it's like, it's all stuff where they're heavily advantaged, like your Camis, your Gurians, and other stuff. They're just putting you in situations where you're having to guess, and you are heavily at a disadvantage there. Luke is not stupid enough to be a top 5 character.
I hear what you're saying there, and I think that's a valid argument to make, and it's a strong one. At the same time, I am not so sure that Luke has to take the sneaky back, amoral path of having a ridiculously busted or OP move or sequence of moves in order to maybe get to the top. I think he is top 5. And so obviously your answer to this next one is no. I think that he has the potential. It's still too early and I haven't been convinced, but I think he has the potential to be in the conversation about being the best character in the game. And I agree with you that he doesn't have those insane busted things that we can immediately point to and say, well, it's clear that characters are winning the majority of the time, or players are winning because this little thing that's really easy to do is simple, or not even necessarily easy to do, but this is carrying them so much. With Luke, it's a different sort of situation, and I think that's really interesting, especially if it's better than the other things. Go ahead.
You're saying if this character is potentially top 1, how is he competing with the Camis and the Urians and Guile and other stuff like that?
We'll get into that. That's part of my whole thing. But I want to give a few other things that point to how he's been doing as of late, since he's a brand new character still. And so just really quickly here, he came out. We just got the December stats, and so Luke was actually used almost 12% of the time, which is almost unheard of. Now, new characters are very popular online because people are trying them out, both exploring if they want to use them and also learning how to fight against them. For sure, that happens. No one gets numbers like almost 12% in their first month, save for Akuma back in the beginning of season 2. He got, I think, a little more than that, something like 13. Dakota just ran a story and he explored that a little bit, and that's up on the front page right now. You can check it out. But Luke has been very popular across the board. We've seen a lot of pros play him, and which always happens because they need to know how to fight against. But we've seen a lot of people that are not pros use using him, will they stick with him? I don't know. I'm sure that 11, almost 12% is going to go down in the coming months, but how much
Um,
so?
and just on the pros note, I was watching CFN quite a bit last night, and actually one of the things I was very, very disappointed with the Luke usage is just how unoptimized most of the pros were with him. A lot of
Oh,
the
I know, I know. I see that in my own play too.
yeah, a
So I
lot of
hear you.
the negative edge combos or positive edge combos or whatever that he has, those are so key to him getting damage and being a good character, a great character potentially. And a lot of the pros were not using those. Now Daigo was, a few others were, but like overall, I was actually very consistently disappointed, even with current Luke play. As
Yeah.
of the time of recording this, it's like, yeah, it's not there for some people.
Oh, it's not there for. I see that a lot. I see that a lot with, and we'll get into talking about Daigo in a second here. But you just have to charge up, and it's like a little tiny window. If you charge too long, and they can block. You don't charge long enough, and you don't get like the wall bounce or the more damage and extended combos. That's hard. Like I
Yeah,
practice that constantly whenever
yeah.
I'm in training mode, waiting for matches, and I don't have it down. I get happy when I land it in a match. So no, I hear you, and even with all of that though, Luke has so many good things about him that people are still, well, at least playing the character, and I dare say winning a decent bit, because in both Wednesday Night Fights and NLBC, the two coasts of America, of the U.S., their weekly coast tournaments, he won 3 days after coming out. So it was like, I think it was December 1st, my birthday. Hey, look at that. Where he won both NLBC and WNF. Now, the guys over at NLBC have been changing back to their other characters and doing their own thing. But over here on the West Coast, WNF has been won by Luke. Unless this is a little bit hard to research because they don't always put the characters up. But as I look back, he's won every week since he's come out, and it hasn't all been the same person that's been winning with him. Chris CCH has the majority, but Nephew has also won. Both of them using Luke. And it's like, it's one thing for Punk to win with a brand new character, one of the, if not the best player in the world, to win one of these kind of tournaments the week that the character comes out, and in this case 3 days after he came out. But for him to continue winning like this at WNF, it's like that's something. That's not everything, but that's interesting. You do not see that with other characters, other DLC characters. Luke is doing things, and he is getting played in ways that we haven't seen other DLC characters played and acknowledged and used. Do you agree with that?
I think that definitely to a point, yes. I do worry about my big concern there, and overall, again, I think you're dead on with it. Is just he does have the similarities of a Lucia, where a lot of people are picked Lucia up initially, and Lucia, unlike Luke, is very good at the meta of Street Fighter V. She is a rushdown mostly character and stuff, but she has to work a little harder with her fireballs and other stuff to make that all come together.
Mm-hmm.
But when Lucia initially came out, everyone said hands down the best character, of this batch of characters, all this other kind of stuff. Like they thought she was just going to be an amazing top tier fighter, and she really fell flat initially. Um, and I'm kind of looking at Luke as in a similar thing where people are super hyped about him and think he's great. And I do think he's a really good character. If you get anywhere near the top 10 in this game, you're really strong. I feel like it's a little bit of Lucia kind of replaying history again of like, I think he's not going to be as good as people think he is when all is said and done.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hear you with the Lucia thing, and I actually do think that she is a top 10 character. I know that's not the popular opinion, but I do think she has all the tools to make it work. What I think Lucia lacks is a conspicuous path to all of that, a conspicuous path for people to see and not easily, but relatively easily make it to using her at that level. Where we're seeing that with Luke in a very well, that's the point of talking about how he's winning tournaments so quickly, is that he comes together for people in a very intuitive way, and his basics, his foundations seem to gel with one another in such a way that you can use him effectively fairly quickly and then continue to sharpen his edges as you get the timing for his combos down, and you can take him even further. And with that in mind, it's like when people get these timings down, the character's going to get better. and his character is already doing really well. So that's something that to me points to him being a particularly powerful. But when comparing him
Well,
to Lucia, it's just hard to make that all come together because she's such a technical character. So even though she has
yeah.
really good tools, they don't necessarily intuitively gel together in a way that people can execute on, in a way that's encouraged them to keep playing and exploring her. But those that have, I think they're doing decently.
Yeah, no, this is the old Lucia too I was talking about when she first came out, not
Yeah,
this
she got a
current
bunch of
one.
buffs too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and she fell off, but again, those points are still very valid. What you're saying about Lucia, I do think that Lucia is very underrated in our community. She's pretty good. I don't know about top 10 good, but she is pretty good, and she's just really underappreciated in this game. But going back to Luke though. My problem with Luke is that playing neutral against him and not giving him stuff to whiff punish, that means he has to go to his fireball, which takes a long time to complete the animation, making him very susceptible to jumps, which is something you do not want to be susceptible to in this game. Now, his DP is insanely good. He has maybe, I don't know if it's the best DP in the game, but it might be. It's really, really, really good.
Gets the job done.
yeah.
It absolutely does. And by the way, I can tell you as a Luke player, the way that he has been set up to throw fireballs and the way that people feel about his fireballs, people jump at him all the time because you're right. He's got a lot of recovery. The fireball has its drawbacks for sure, but it's also very effective and people want to jump. So now it's at the point where you can just hang out at that level or at that distance and duck around. They're going to jump and you're going to get your DPs, man.
Yeah, well, the only thing about it when I was watching high level footage like GamerB and others and stuff is even with Daigo, the reads that people start to get on the fireball timing are pretty rough because the punishment for jumping on a fireball in this game is insane. I play Rose, I know it very well, and it's like that one bad fireball could basically be the end of you right there. You know, it is, and that's very typical when you're playing against people like, you know, Cammy and other stuff. It's like, oh yeah, they got one read and now I'm dead. You know, and that's where I really start to think that Luke isn't as good as people, you know, are making him out to be, because he does have these very clear drawbacks that are rough for him to overcome when people fully fundamentally understand where his weaknesses are or not. And again, it's hard for Luke to kind of get in consistently, in my opinion. He has to go to that fireball game when you just kind of sit back and neutral and don't give him stuff to whiff punish. He is maybe the best whiff punisher in the entire game. That's a big thing to have, and especially pros are going to be attracted to it, but it's like, just don't give him stuff to whiff punish, and that makes it hard.
Yeah, I think, okay, that is a spot that I want to get to. But first, I really want to talk about Daigo really quick and how there have been a lot of pros, like you said. There's like GamerB and Momochi and Punko and Nemo and plenty. And then Daigo. Daigo's been playing Guile as his main for years, and he's tested out all the other characters that have come out. He's toyed around with others, but he's stuck with Guile as his main. He's entertaining the idea of moving to Luke. In fact, he's recently said, and Daigo says the stuff with a pretty cavalier manner, like he might change his tune pretty quickly. So we take all this with a grain of salt. But he is also Daigo. He has his fighting game intuition, the most celebrated fighting game player of all time thus far. His opinions do carry some weight, and he has said that he feels like Luke very well could make it into top 5, and that if Luke doesn't get nerfed when Capcom releases their patch, presumably after after
March.
February, when Capcom Cup would have been, but is now going to be replaced by an online final. But if he doesn't get nerfed, then Luke will be Daigo's main. At least that's where he's at right now with the character, and that's a lot for. And did you put Guile in your top 5? Was he like
Guile
2
was
or
like
3?
number 2 for me.
Yeah, I have him in my top 10.
Yeah,
but for Daigo to leave Guile and like Daigo's really good and really intuitive. He knows like the frames with Guile, and yet he's entertaining the idea of leaving the character. In fact, at this point, he's basically going to, unless Luke gets substantially nerfed in the next update.
The only
so
thing about
that's
that is,
something.
It is something, and I agree. And as you say, Daigo is super wishy-washy. I love Daigo. I'm hands down the best fighting game player of all time. Pound for pound, I don't think there's a better one. He's super wishy-washy with his opinions, and I could see him come back and literally be like, "Oh yeah, I'm not dropping Guile. Screw this. I'm sticking with Luke." Because we've seen this before with Kage and a few others, where Daigo got really hyped up about the character and did play them for a while, and then just said, "Nah, I got Guile. What am I doing?" You know, and that's, I think it's going to be another similar scenario here, because Guile is really good in this game.
It could be. But so you were saying here that you're a big thing that's weighing against Luke is the fact that his fireballs have a lot of recovery, and if you jump it, a jump in combo is a big deal. It has always been, and it still is a huge deal. Now, defense has been buffed. I find myself as Luke using V shift plenty when I'm in these sticky situations, and I don't think a single jump in is the end of the game or the end of the round like it used to be, or it wasn't ever the end. but it was more likely the end before there was more defensive mechanics put in. So I don't think that disqualifies him at all. I think the
Right.
fact that you can jump over his fireballs is like, that's a pretty general thing. Any character that has a fireball that can happen to, and some it's going to happen to more than others depending on where the weakness of their fireball is. If it's in the startup, if it's in the recovery, it changes. But that by itself, yes, it is a weakness that Luke has fireballs that you can jump over. But one, he's got above average health by the and so his defense is not bad. He's got a 3 frame and he's got V shift. So and also one of the best DPs in the game. It's a very effective DP. This leads me to the fact that there are a lot of characters that have had sore thumb OP abilities that have you can immediately point to them and say, this is why the character is broken. Abigail and Manat in season 3, their V triggers were ridiculous, and that's where the round was often lost or won by these characters, and everything kind of simplified down into how do the interactions based around these really, really powerful maneuvers go. The season 2 characters like Laura with her medium kick and her V trigger, and Balrog's V trigger, and Urian's everything, his normals and his specials and his V trigger were all busted. Point is that G's V trigger, Rashid's normals and his corner maneuverability, Akuma's air fireballs, and the fact that he's so easily able to switch sides and get out of the corner and put you in the corner, things like that have stood out and been like, that's the clear reason, or a massive reason, that is putting this character's abilities it's imbalancing them and in their favor. Luke has a bunch of really good stuff, but I would say that Luke has something like straight B pluses across the board. His neutral, his damage output, his defensive options, his fireball game, his V trigger, they're all really good and they're all really effective, but I don't think any of them really stand out as when they hit you, they're like, this game is not fair, it's demoralizing. It's like, oh, that's a tool that has its drawbacks, like his neutral, where he's really good at whiff punishing, but also he's really whiff punishable. And if you just sit back and you let the Luke player miss in front of you, you're going to be able to punish him in a similar manner that he punishes you. Maybe not from as far, but he's moving forward. So that's a double-edged sword that I think is really well balanced as far as I can tell so far. And that's like, his fireball game is really good, but it's got a lot of recovery. And if you jump one of those fireballs, I think there's an appropriate amount of damage that goes to Luke versus the utility of that move by itself. Now, straight B pluses across the board is really nice to have, but I also think that the sum is, how do you say this? The sum of the parts is actually greater than the whole, or rather that the parts don't just add up with one another, they multiply because of the way these B pluses gel with one another. And I think I've said this before, it's kind of like the opposite of Nikali. Nikali has a bunch of really potentially good moves, but they don't seem to feed off of one another. Everything Luke does, it feeds into the next thing. So you were just talking about it, right? Playing the neutral. It's like, if you try to shut Luke's neutral with his whiff punishing down, he takes a step back, and you've taken a step back, and now he's in the perfect spot for his fireball zoning, and he can go to that option. And if you're really looking at the fireballs, he has the ability to go for the anti-airs or bait that. He can go to another gear, as far as I can tell, no matter where you are in the match and in the round. Even when he's on his back foot, he's never out of options, and his options are never bad. So even though he doesn't have some brain dead round ending as soon as he gets it sequence or single move that he can do, he's always got options that enhance one another. And so all those B pluses, when used in tandem with one another, add up to like S, and maybe the best in the game. Or I should say, they multiply to S. I've said a lot. What do you think about all those things I just said?
Yeah, no. I mean, a lot of that adds up, and we're on a spectrum of like, how good do we think Luke is? I don't think there's any argument that he's a pretty darn good character in this. Anytime, again, you're talking top 10, but again, that where I go with it, just that the tools to me don't add up to being more than Cammy. Kind of thing. It's just Cammy has just got so many advantages to the point where it's like, what are the developers thinking? Like, it is, you guys are literally taking like some of the most unbelievable stuff we've seen in a Street Fighter game and just not touching it. And it's like, so for example, Cammy has a Dammy too, I guess, but Cammy has a double dash after her super, so she lands this huge combo and she gets a great
Oki after
mix
her
up after
3-frame
it.
full screen super.
And it's like, okay, like Luke doesn't have anything that touches that. Like he doesn't have anything that's comparable to that. Like, and so that is a huge advantage for Cammy. Then she has one of the better V triggers that's 2 bars, and like she just gets these crazy good mix-ups off of it, super high damage. She has so much brain dead easy stuff that most competent players could pick up and do in a short period of time. Luke does not have that. And so Cammy players are able to focus on their footsies and neutral play, all this other kind of stuff, while Luke is sitting there juggling 50 different pins. Cammy's juggling like one and is almost getting juggled for her practically with how brain dead easy she is to play in this game, how many advantages she has. That to me just puts Luke behind the fold because there's enough characters that have that going for them.
Yeah, so I can appreciate that she has, and plenty of other characters have, clearly overpowered abilities, and I would even go as far as to say that some of what Cammy does gels with the other things that Cammy does, and iron sharpens iron, so that they even become more powerful when used with one another, which is basically my argument for Luke, is that as many advantages as he has, the fact that they all work together might add up to him being the best, but I think it at least adds up to him being in the top 5. Yeah, he doesn't have an overwhelming, obvious thing like that, but I guess I just reserve the potential that
Oh yeah,
the
no,
things that he does have might add up to more than even the strength of Cammy, because, Wednesday night fights in NLBC, why isn't Cammy winning? Is it because those players aren't entering? And I know Cammy's got plenty of representation in major tournaments and such, and so that argument only goes so far. But also, it's like, I don't know. I don't feel like as a Luke player that I'm ever in a terrible situation, whether it's against Cammy or Urian or even people are saying Dalsum maybe, but I'm not really seeing it. It feels like he has an answer for everything, and at the end of the day, it's just gonna kind of come down to, well, does his really good stuff across the board add up to some of the really bright hot spots that other characters have? And I don't think that we can say for sure that it doesn't at this point,
yeah,
because everything is pointing to this character's doing better for where he's at than most other characters ever have.
and I really look at what the meta of the game is, and we know the meta of Street Fighter V is Rushdown, Okazemi, and other things. And not that Luke doesn't have that stuff; he has that as well. But that top tier characters in this game have traditionally had those stuff, and they've been very good at it. But so that's kind of where I go to with the argument that I don't think there's a spot where Luke doesn't have it, but I think he's going to get figured out a little bit here, and I think some of the shine is going to wear off of him, and there it is.
I think that's true. It's very possible, rather, I guess I should say. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see as things play out, how things go and how he performs in tournaments. If Capcom indeed ever does return to offline tournaments, they just canceled the one that they were going to have. So we're still waiting on stuff like that. But in the meantime, Luke has been very interesting, very popular, getting a lot of good word from players like Daigo. And I do think that he's a top 5, and I reserve the potential for him to be a top 1. I want to know what the people think. So do you think? Please give us a comment. Let us know, where do you think Luke ranks right now? Top 10, top 5, top 1, and we'll see you in the next video.